In every single session with our students, the subject of communication has come up. How to communicate responsible tourism, how to say what you're doing is different, how to change supplier, staff, or consumer behaviours. And I'm pleased to say we've brought together an expert panel who are joining me now to discuss effective storytelling. We have with us today Gergana Nikolova, co-founder and CEO of BehaviorSMART, a B Corps certified venture that uses behavioral science to ensure most travellers opt for sustainable and regenerative choices. Paige McClanahan, author of The New Tourist, is one I prepared earlier, which challenges people to wake up to the powers and perils of travel, and it's one of the recommended reading books on our responsible tourism course. Paige is also a journalist for titles such as the New York Times, the BBC, and Washington Post. And finally, we have Aziz founder of MEJDI Tours and a winner in our piece, Understanding and Inclusion Global Responsible Tourism Award, which we will hear about later. So first, I'd like each of the panelists to give us their views on communicating tourism effectively, responsible tourism effectively. Gergana.
Thank you very much. It's after Matt's words, it's really easy to continue the conversation and to build on this with being experts in using psychology and behavioral science. Clarifying that some of what we are focused on and what we are trying to do is to eliminate the friction of what has made communication in sustainability difficult. And it is understanding that when travelers are on a holiday, they're really focused on the experience. And if we try to make them feel guilt, or if we try them to make an exception in deviating from their focus, there's always a friction. So we try to eliminate the friction and actually make it easy for them to focus on the experience and design the experience to be more sustainable by default. So this is one way which we are trying to help remove the friction.
Thank you. Paige.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paige McClanahan. As Debbie said, I'm an American author and travel writer based in Paris. And yes, I've been thinking about these questions about how to communicate responsible tourism for a while. I got my first travel writing gig in 2011 when I was hired to update the second edition of the Brat Guide to Sierra Leone, not exactly the world's most obvious tourist destination, but I got my start there, started freelancing from there, wrote regularly for the Washington Post and the New York Times, and then had a travel podcast for a while, and my book was published last year. So I guess there are 2 points that I'd like to make here that, just 2 ideas that come to mind when I think about how to overcome the challenges of communicating about responsible tourism. The first is the power we have as storytellers to lead by example, to show by doing, to sort of be the change that we want to see in our readers. And the second point is the power of putting a human face on these destinations, which, as Matt said, are always, we think about them as destinations, but they're always someone's home. So the power that we have as storytellers to put a human face. And if I may, I just want to give one very brief example that kind of illustrates these 2 points. A show of hands, can anyone identify the person in this photo besides Aziz? Yeah, okay, yeah. That's right, it's Justin Bieber. Why am I talking about Justin Bieber? There's another photo of him. I want to just give a very brief example from the south coast of Iceland, which I visited for my book. So he's standing on the edge of a canyon, which has since come to be known as Justin Bieber Canyon. So if we have Justin Bieber as our sort of travel storyteller in this instance, so this is in 2015. He visited this canyon, which had become a destination on social media with a film crew, and he filmed the music video for his song "I'll Show You." Here, the song has nothing to do with Iceland. It's all about sort of handling the power and perils of fame, And but he came. He used this beautiful landscape as kind of a backdrop. He's not interacting with it. He's not learning about it. He uses it as a backdrop for his own ego. So if he's our sort of travel storyteller who's showing us how to behave, the only human face that appears in his video is him. So what happened after this video appeared, the canyon went from having a few thousand visitors a year to 300,000 visitors a year. And what did those visitors do? They behaved like he behaved. They came and they took pictures of themselves in front of the landscape and they left. Right? So, you know, people do as we show them, right? They follow our examples, right? So let's say my platform isn't quite as big as Justin Bieber's platform, just to put it mildly. But I visited this canyon when I was reporting for my book. I spent time there. And I spent some time with this woman named Fanny Gunnarsdottir, if I pronounced that correctly, who works for the Environment Agency of Iceland. And so when I thought, you know what, I want to go to this canyon and I want to show my readers, people, you know, who follow me, a different way to interact with this landscape. So let me go and let me spend some time there and let me get to know someone who works there. So I spent some time with Fanny and I watched her at work. I kind of shouted her while she was doing her job. She told me the history of, you know, of her work there. And she showed me these two images she has in her hand, which you can't really see, which are before and after shots of what the canyon looked like before they closed it to visitors, after the Justin Bieber sort of prompted inundation. And then after, they had to shut down the canyon on 2 occasions for several months at a time to allow the landscape to recover and to build the sort of infrastructure they needed to make sure that all those visitors could come without damaging the landscape. So when I'm telling that story in my book, I'm trying to be the kind of person that I want my traveler to be, right? I'm asking questions, and I'm not doing that by sort of like wagging my finger at them, right? I'm doing it by showing them. I'm trying to be a model, and I'm putting a human face on it. And I try to, you know, and Fanny, she was this, brilliant, kind of funny person. I try to sort of make her really come alive on the page, because if I can make my reader care about her, I can make my reader care about that destination, right? And when my reader cares about her and they care about the destination, when they get there, they're going to make decisions in a way that are going to, you know, support a sustainable future for that destination. So my 2 points: leading by example, showing by doing, and putting a human face in these destinations when we can. And it's a really powerful opportunity that we have as storytellers in travel. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you, Paige.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
I'll use your photos. It's okay. They're good, except for Justin Bieber. My name is Aziz Abasar, and I love everything you said, both of you, and I'll continue in that. I think for me, the communication goes to eventually 2 things as well. One is responsible tourism isn't a burden. And I think there is times where we feel like, oh, you know, responsible tourism, you have to go out of your way and it's going to be suffering. And there was a few researches actually that show there's a significant number of people when they hear the word responsible tourism, they're like, oh, I'm going to have to rough it. That's what it means. I'm going to really do something that's so difficult. Or another group that thinks, oh, responsible tourism, that means I can't afford it. It seems something too high end. And to me, it's neither of those. Responsible tourism is fun. It's actually what makes me want to travel. And as someone who's been all over the world, I like photography, I like all these cool things. But at the end of the day, what makes me want to engage in responsible tourism are the stories, are the people who I meet there, are the exciting things. There's a famous saying by Ibn Battuta from the 13th century that goes, travel makes you speechless, but then it turns you into a storyteller. And when I think of how to communicate about responsible tourism, that's exactly how. It's the stories, it's the people, it's the thing that excite you. And eventually when people come back from their trips, they're the ones who will spread the story. It's not really me as a tour operator, it's the travelers who've been on it. So telling these stories, and when I think of all the destinations, I was talking to somebody earlier that I've been to, as much as I love archaeology and as much as I love history and photography and animals, which I really do all of those things, it's always a story of a person that made me change my mind about something, that helped me see the world in a different way. And that's why I continue to travel, because if it's all about just a nice beach, or a couple of good nice beaches close to my home, so why would I go so far away? And I was talking about like Kenya, which I enjoyed the animals, but Paige and I love Kenya. You lived there, so you know it a bit better. And my favorite experience there, though, was not just the animals, even though I have them literally on my phone because I take the photos, make them my screensaver. But it's meeting this kid who's 20 some years old, who grew up as a street kid, was a criminal, ended up spending some time in prison, and then found tourism as a way to actually find a new life. And he became a tour guide in downtown Nairobi. And that's my favorite experience there. And that's what responsible tourism can do. It can change the world to be a better place.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Well said. I'd like to start by asking Gergana some questions. We're going to start with a bit of science. Gergana, you say the brain has two systems to make decisions, and this is where a lot of people in tourism get it wrong because they're appealing to the rational brain. Would you like to give the example of the 10 euro example that you told me about, which just shows how our minds think differently?
Yes, because the scientist on our team is not here, I'll go to the shorter version of the story. So yes, our brains has two parts, and traditional economics tends to think that people are really rational and they take all the information in place to make a certain decision. But the little story that I will share an example is if we all go to buy a new coffee pot and it costs 35 pounds. And as we check out the cashier desk and we're told that 3 blocks down the road, absolutely the same one costs 25. We are most likely to leave this one and walk the 3 blocks and go for the 25 pounds one. A week later, if we go and buy a backpack that costs 600 pounds, and we are told that, again, 3 blocks down the road, the same backpack costs 590, and as most of you probably will forego this, because in the context, 509, it's just 10 pounds within the 590 doesn't really mean a lot. And in reality, it is the same 10 pounds that you can buy a beer, chocolate, wine, save for your next trip. And this is a very small example as humans. And of course, because we are speaking about travelers, we need to translate that in travel, what it means. So that's why I started mentioning that we need to design the experience in a different way, being realistic. What happens when the traveler is there on a journey, whether they're on a leisure travel, they're there to enjoy the place. And of course, if I'm going to Rome in August and I run out of water and I'm thirsty, I'll go and buy a plastic water bottle. Of course, I'm thirsty and this is the easiest choice. But if my tour operator or if the hotel and everyone in my delivery of the experience has told me there are water fountains and you can refill here, the water is good and there are water fountains, it's most likely that we will not be buying a plastic water bottle. So those small moments when we can actually change the design and make the choice of the traveler the easier one to be more sustainable. This is where we use psychology so that we can actually change the sustainability from demand-driven to a supply-driven.
So you're saying that we as humans are terrible at rational decisions, which is true, and we can't wag
Not
off.
a bit of intentions. We live in such times.
And as Paige says, we can't wag our fingers at people. So saying don't throw away your towels, none of that works. And your argument is we have to have choice by design in the way that we introduce things so that people automatically want to have the right choice. So I was talking to a hotelier who put all the vegetarian and vegan options at the front of the menu, and that instantly transformed the amount of vegetarian and vegan options that we're selling. So give us a couple of examples of things that you've done with this choice design with other businesses.
We worked in the Nordics. We work a lot in the Nordics, and with some accommodations there, we managed to save over 20-30% of energy by, for example, communicating, because this is the core of the panel, communicating that the temperature is set to a certain temperature by default, because this is healthiest for them and so on and so forth. And at the same time, the hotelier left locally made socks, as this is the way locals keep themselves warm because it's cold in the Nordics. And this actually not only reduced 24% the energy of the property, but actually enhanced the experience and the guest satisfaction of the property. In Italy, we had in mobility an example where actually 70% of the guests, 68 if we have to be precise, opted for using local transportation or walking by designing very simple maps of the place to the nearby attractions and also places to eat. And it actually eliminated the friction of people not feeling uncomfortable, of not knowing the place and not knowing the language. And actually they were going in the back alleys, they were stopping at local places, and they started interacting with people. And again, it was not only the emissions that were reduced, but again, we had more uptake on local food, plus also increased guest satisfaction. So little small tweaks, as Matt mentioned, that actually start helping the businesses see the results, and they're encouraged to continue.
So we, as Aziz said, responsible tourism shouldn't be a burden. It should be enjoyable and fun and the default choice. And it's up to us to create that for everybody. Paige, going back to Gergana's choice design, have you got examples that you've seen in evidence as you've traveled of choice design that you've experienced?
What something that I'd love to speak about that I think gets to the same point is when I've seen people who work in tourism who really set up their operations in a way that invites people to participate. So it really makes it easy for people to get involved in the destination. I'm thinking of one person in particular who you mentioned to me, Cindy Punahaule, a native Hawaiian woman who lives and works on the big island of Hawaii, which is where she grew up, at Kahaluu Bay. And she actively, it's a beautiful bay. It's one of the most popular bays on the big island for snorkeling. And she really saw how over the course of her life, and she's probably in her 70s now, how over the course of her life, the ecosystem of the bay was really damaged by, the sunscreen that snorkelers would wear, just people stepping on the coral reefs. And so I think about 20 years ago, she started an organization called Reef Teach, where she actually really works with the tourists who come. She invites tourists to come go through a training and on how to, how to protect the reef and how to talk to other visitors about how to protect the reef. So you can just go, you can be a tourist there, but you'll interact with other tourists who have gone through the training, and people come back year after year. She has a really well-established network, but she's just set up a system such that she's really inviting the tourists to be part of the solution. And I've seen other examples of this in the French Alps, particularly that stick out, where they're inviting tourists to come and, help them do, like count species in that, in the fragile alpine landscape, be part of the solution. And again, it comes back to this question of not wagging our fingers at people and not saying sort of do as I say, not as I do, but really inviting them to join us in these efforts.
And I'm also interested, we're talking about how we can't preach to people, but your book is all about the self-reflection on me as a tourist. What am I going to do? Why am I thinking this should be considered differently? What was it that triggered you to make a decision to travel more thoughtfully, to think more responsibly?
Well, yeah, I've been a traveler, been a tourist for most of I've lived outside my home country for the last, most of my adult life, the last 17 years. So I've, worn the label of tourist for a long time. But it was really in 2018 when I moved with my family to a little village in the French Alps, which is almost completely dependent on tourism to sustain the local economy, that I really became a resident of a tourist destination. And I came to, see and think about all of these questions with a lot more nuance. And I saw at once how tourism absolutely gave life to this community. I mean, without tourism, this little village in the French Alps would have become a ghost town probably, a generation ago. But thanks to the opening of the local ski resort and, hiking and whitewater rafting and sort of visiting the local cheesemakers and all these things that one can do as a tourist, the village survives, and it's really a thriving community. And like all of the other parents at my kids' school worked in tourism. I mean, that is really what makes the village run. At the same time that, 2018, 2019, I had been a travel writer for a long time, and I'm seeing headlines like, tourism is ruining Barcelona, problems with tourism in Amsterdam and Venice. And I wanted to look at these questions with more depth, with more nuance, and what circumstances does this really work, and what circumstances is it not working? And that's really, and I felt like more and more people, other people I saw, were asking themselves these same questions. And so yeah, I wanted to go more in depth than I could in my news articles or magazine articles I was writing. So I decided to write a book.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you for that. It's been very useful to have. Aziz, the cover of Paige's book asks, how did a once niche activity become one of the world's most important means of contact across culture? How did tourism become a really important a way for us to connect culturally? And I suspect this may be in some part down to what you've achieved in your work with your dual narrative tours. We heard Gergana talk about choice, and you made a dramatic choice at the age of 18. Your brother had been killed 6 years or 7 years before, and you decided that you had a choice. You said, I have a choice, and I decided my choice was to commit to bring down the walls of anger and hatred and ignorance that separate people. Everybody told you a tour company wouldn't work in this field, that you were mad. Why did you do it? How did you do it? What was it that made you make the decision to come into tourism to bring down these barriers?
Thank you. First, you should read Paige's book. I did, and it's amazing. I'm happy I read it so I can answer the question. I did my homework. No, you're absolutely right. I think in some sense, the design question you talked about is also relates to tourism. I grew up in Jerusalem. Anybody heard of it? Small town. It's actually is a small city. It's less than 1 million people. And I grew up where I've seen a lot of tourists. And since I was a kid, I felt an object for tourism. Tourists would come by my school and they want to take a photo of me, and I'll pose for them because I thought I'd be starting my modeling career, but didn't go well. So went into tourism. But after my brother was killed for 10 years, all I thought about was, for 8 years, all I thought about was revenge, because that's the normal thing. I guess if somebody comes and kills a relative of yours and you're 10 years old, you don't rationalize that. And eventually what I realized is this division that we have is caused by how little we know about whoever we believe is the other. And in reality, we think of travel as how far we go. I think that travel is the most impactful travel I've ever done in my life was the one across the street. And I think it's true everywhere. It's true here in London. It's true in Paris. It's true in Africa. It's true many places I've been to where it's the most impactful trip we can do. And from that experience of me going to West Jerusalem and meeting for the first time, being a Palestinian, meeting Israelis, and realizing that really what divides us as people isn't color, isn't religion, isn't nationality. What divides us are values. And it shouldn't be me against you because of our skin color. It should be if we have to divide people. And unfortunately, the world doesn't matter how much we want to be above all of that. We do see the world as us versus them. And I argue that the us versus them must be those of us who believe in equality, in peace, in making the world a better place, in justice, in dignity for every human being, and those who don't yet, which means it creates a whole different dynamic. And when I started MEJDI Tours, as a Palestinian, I started it with a Jewish friend, which already was crossing boundaries, which is the name of my book. But we went to all these consultants and people who are experts in tourism, and we told them, this is our idea. What do you think? We wanted to bring, instead of one tour guide on a tour, bring 2 tour guides from opposite backgrounds. So Northern Ireland would be Catholic and Protestant, Israel and Palestine would be Israeli and Palestinian, and have 2 tour guides lead a trip together, and then meet a lot of people from different backgrounds, from journalists, archaeologists, to historian, to rabbis to imams to former IRA to former paramilitary, depends on the country we're gonna go to. And everyone we met, literally everyone said, this is the dumbest idea you can do. Because why would anybody pay to go and have these kind of conversations? And one good thing about being a Palestinian, we are stubborn. And I guess I can't talk for my partner, but I think Jews are similar sometimes. And so the two of us decided to do it anyway. And this is where the design question, if you don't put a product in front of people, you don't know if it's gonna sell or not. And the moment we put the product out, what we realized there was a big demand for that product, not only a big demand in Israel and Palestine and Northern Ireland, all the other destinations we developed, which now over 30, most of them came from travelers who traveled with us in one place and then came and said, have you considered this in that place? If you do, I'll bring a group and we'll travel with you there. And so we end up developing these places that we didn't even think about. And it challenges us to see what are the unheard voices in these places. What is it that can be different? Because I don't want to run a trip that everybody else is running, but rather look at the marginalized voices, the stories that people don't hear about. And those are always the highlights that people tell us that happen on the trip.
That's fantastic. Effectively, your whole business is choice design. You've created something which makes it easy and frictionless for people to really listen to a dual narrative and change the way they perceive a country.
Yeah. And it's not a fight, which is very important. People assume, oh, if I come on a trip like this, two people fighting and arguing, Paige was on this trip, and I think can say, there weren't that many fightings, or at all, almost any fighting.
If I can just jump in, I mean, Aziz gave a plug for my book. I'm going to give a really big plug for Aziz's tours, because actually as research for my book, I joined the MEJDI tour in Israel and Palestine three and a half years ago. And it was amazing. My mind was blown to see how, just how powerfully people reacted to being in this situation. And we had our Israeli guide and our Palestinian guide, and they were friends. And like, you know, in the evening after the day of going around sightseeing, like we all went out to sort of watch a soccer game on TV, and we're all like chatting, and you could see that they were.
It was Liverpool, and I don't remember.
Yeah. And they were really friends, and it was mainly Americans in the group, you know, those of us who had joined the tour, and yeah, it was really powerful just for us to see that, and to see them standing, an Israeli and a Palestinian standing side by side, taking turns talking, taking questions from the group, and to see the change. I mean, there was, you know, one woman in the group whose grandparents had been, who were Holocaust survivors, and to see her and then having dinner in a Palestinian home. And she was like, I want everyone in my synagogue to come and go on this tour. You know, it was really, people had really powerful reactions. So yeah, but that design, you know, it all comes from the setting it up, making it easy, make it approachable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're just about to finish, but Gergana, please, I'd like
Just
one point from everyone. Gergana.
I want to first congratulate you for this. And it's also a proof that innovation, because this is type of an innovation, doesn't need to be rocket science. The same as behavioral science, it's not rocket science, but we need to really look at these deep connections and yes, go human-centered and explore how we can get closer to the human and to the places. So, and this is when really the magic happens and we can speak of responsible tourism, impactful tourism.
Thank you. And one last comment from each of you before we finish. Aziz, what would your advice be to anyone thinking about their communications?
Well, based on what I just said, don't listen too many. Oh, based on what I said, don't listen too much of expert advice. If you have an idea, try it. There's one of my, I think use some art as well. One of the things I found as I started looking at MEJDI is looking at poetry and art and sayings and so on. I found so many people had the same idea already before me, and they didn't do it in the sense of business, but they did it in their art. So there's an Israeli author, Yehuda Amichai, who years before MEJDI was started had this poem in it. He says, there's people by David's gate and he's carrying fruit and vegetables for his home. And he sits by, the gate, and the tour guide sees him and he says, the tour guide uses me as a moving target. And he says, see this man there with fruit and vegetables by the gate, ignore him. but a little bit up, a little bit to the left, there's a Roman arch. It's 2,000 years old. And then the poet continues, goes, but redemption will come when that same tour guide will say, see that 2,000-year-old march? Leave it for a second, but a little bit to the right, a little bit down, there sits a man with fruit and vegetables for his family. That's what matters.
Thank you. Thank you. Paige?
Yeah, I think a final point would be maybe to have the courage to be open about our own failings when we're communicating about this. I mean, to get back to the point about not wagging our fingers, part of that is being like in my book, it would have been very easy. I mean, I make a little bit of fun of Justin Bieber, but I think he's okay. But it would have been easy for me to choose an influencer and say, look at this influencer and how, selfish they are or how silly they are in their kind of shallow posting. I didn't do that. What I did do was I went back in my own Instagram feed and I found something that I had posted that I wasn't so proud of. And I kind of made fun of myself for doing that, right? And I was like, what was I thinking when I did that? And I did it in a sort of a lighthearted way, but I'm just trying to be the change that I want to inspire in my reader, right? I'm not wagging my finger at anybody. I'm just kind of making fun of myself a little bit. I'm saying, look at how, yeah, this is what I was thinking then. This is what I think now. And I hope that by doing that, I'm serving as a role model for my reader and, opening up a space for them to do that as well. So.
Thank you. Gergana?
Building on this, yes, I was also about to say, of course, I'm not mentioning our 2% change and 3% change. So not everything that we try works. Try, test, and I really liked, and it encourages me, Matt's word, progress over
Progress over polish.
perfectionism. This is the way just to keep going and moving forward and be really the people who move and share the progress and the good practices.
Thank you. A round of applause, please, for our fantastic panel.